because you are starting a startup or already have one? Okay. So pretty much like everybody's like, awesome. Everybody wants to hear, give me the real deal. Give me something actionable that I can walk away with today. Okay, I can do that. Awesome. And how many of you, this is not your first startup? Yeah, I'm about to say, right? Which one? And how many of you are not members of Startup Shell right now? This is beautiful. Okay, so first and foremost, let me say you are here. You have made it. You are in the room. This is the Brain Trust. This is where you want to live for the rest of your time at the University of Maryland. If you have applied and not been accepted to Startup Shell, apply again, and then apply again. Every time that you are not accepted, consider that your invitation to round 2 of getting into Startup Shell, because you want to be here. This place changes lives, not just companies. All right, and I think you've seen some of the people on the wall and heard some of their stories about where they've ended up. Pretty much everybody on that cluster on the left-hand side is doing something amazing right now. And partly, I think, because of the talent that they had when they came to Startup Shell, and partly because that talent was just exponentially magnified and like made bigger, and it's the logarithmic scale of opportunity that comes when you get this many cool people in the room who are all running in a similar but not the same direction, bumping into each other. So who am I? Why am I here today? Well, they needed a Shell talk, so they called me up, and I was available, number one. But number two, I am Juliana Neelbauer. I was the attorney advisor for Startup Shell most recently, and did that for about 2 years. I also was on the other side of this wall when they initially projected up that logo and were painting it. Eric Mincer and Justin Searles and the original gray hairs who started this whole experiment. And I walked down the hall from the adult incubator in this room and saw them, crazy kids, just hanging out on a ladder, painting something on the wall. And I said, it's much more exciting in that room than this room. I'm gonna go hang out with them and see what they're up to. And out of that came a long relationship with Startup Shell. So I live in McLean, Virginia, and I come back as often as I can because even as a mid-30s person, I want to suck up some of the energy and excitement that comes out of what you guys are doing here. And I've had the opportunity to tour many incubators all over the country. This is special. Take advantage of it. And then stick with it even after you graduate and come back and visit. All right, so that's my spiel on that. Otherwise, who am I? So before I walked by that room and I saw the projection on the wall and I walked in and said hello, I was a law student, and therefore I'm also a member of the Shell, right? So I was incubated in my legal career through the Shell. But also I had been an entrepreneur in the DC tech community and ran a large pitch event in DC called Social Matchbox for about 6-7 years before deciding to go and pivot my career to go into law for startups. And so I have been an operations person in pivoting startups that are funded and need to just change their product direction. I've seen startups, many fail. I've seen many almost fail and succeed greatly. Living Social being a great example of that. They started off as a bookshelf app on Facebook, back when apps on Facebook actually made money. And DC, that was all anybody was doing in 2007. And they came and pitched at our event. They got their first investor at our event, which was Grow Tech Ventures, which is still in the area. If you want an introduction, there might be an opportunity there. And then from that, they pivoted hard into a completely different platform and are now still a successful startup and one of the ones that we brag about in the DC area. So that was my career. I decided to go back to law school and start serving my clients in the startup community with better legal services, because I found that most lawyers who understand software are patent attorneys, and that's all they do. And a lot of companies needed the kind of advice you need right now, right? Just tell me what I need to know about how to form my company so I don't make mistakes that cost me time and money down the road. And so I started my own law firm, Neelbauer Law, got other like-minded attorneys together, did that for a few years, and then now I work for Ad Hoc, which is a custom software solution provider for, used to be commercial, but then they got pulled into the federal space when healthcare.gov failed terribly, and they needed a team to fix it. in about 3 weeks. So they called up the partners of my company and said, you guys do amazing work that's user-centric and agile in the consumer web space. Can you do it for the government really, really fast? Yeah, let's try that. And so from that, we built a huge reputation and a company around, let's try that, hence ad hoc. And most recently, we just won the vets.gov project to fix veterans benefits. So people stop dying trying to submit PDFs that don't go anywhere. And that's what we're working on right now. So that's me. I've had the chance, therefore, to see a lot of companies that get complete bootstrap to success or failure, that do venture capital raises, multiple rounds to success or failure, and then also companies that rely upon grants or government contracts, now more recently, to have success or failure. And so I can talk to you about all those things in more depth if you want to have a breakout session some other time. But tonight, let's hit the starting gate, right? So you're all here. You've got a startup, or you think you might want to, or you're not sure. Is it actually legally a startup yet, or is it just a company? Where am I sitting? A lot of you probably are on a spectrum right now between registered, right? You've got an actual company somewhere, you've filed stuff with the state, and you've paid money. You're getting taxes you got to pay every year, all the way to, you know, we're winging it, man. We're just going to do it, and then we'll worry about registering a company later once we've got our team and our product and we're ready to go to market. The secret that you might not realize is that if you are anywhere on the spectrum, you still legally have a company. So you don't have to register a darn thing. You don't have to register a darn thing as an individual. You're called a sole proprietorship in the state of Maryland. Or you don't have to register anything and you can be a general partnership in the state of Maryland. Right now, you all have a real business because you all told me you did. And that's often the only legal requirement. Just going out in the world, into public, and saying, I'm in business. So congratulations, you're all in business. What does that mean? Things like taxes and reports to the state already apply to you right now. So congratulations. In addition, other fun things apply to you right now, like something we love to talk about in law because it pays our bills and is our main way to protect you and justify our existence, which is liability, right? So as you know, you've got people you work with. You have liability between each of you with who's bringing in what intellectual property and who's contributing what. And if someone runs away and steals things, you're going to be upset and you're going to want to sue them for stuff. And also with your contractors and your volunteers and your employees, if you guys have actually paid somebody and made them part of the team. And then in addition, you have liability, the company has liability with you too. So in fact, any of you could sue your own business right now and go to court and do that if you had an issue with the company, even though it's not registered. So this is a huge thing that all of you in this room are already responsible for thinking about and have to deal with, even though you haven't registered your business yet, if you haven't. Now, if you have, then you might not understand how that registration affects things like taxes, liability, and your intellectual property, which is another huge reason why people come out to Startup Shell to listen to Shell Talks, right? You're all building something, whether it be a service or a product, and a lot of you are probably thinking a lot about, how do I protect this? Good news, bad news. Good news, there's a ton I could talk about with this. Bad news, we're not going to talk about it tonight. Sorry, we'll have to come back, or we'll get one of your other intellectual property attorneys to come out and talk about that. But all these things already apply to your business. Your business, as a default, probably owns most of this unless you make an agreement amongst yourselves to the contrary. So your business potentially even has assets right now that are not yours. This is real. Welcome to the big leagues. You're all in business. So what do you, now that you know you're all in business and you have real responsibilities for that business and to that business, let's talk about what you can do to potentially mitigate some of these responsibilities, deal with some of these issues, and even start thinking about this. And the big holy grail of all startups, which is how am I going to fund this thing while I build it up, right? Okay, so any questions so far? No one's terrified? I got all your attention. I love it. You're all in business. Congratulations, you learned something. All right, so 3 things that you need to think about when you pick your entity, right? Now you've got one. You might want to mold it into something else than a sole proprietorship or a general partnership. You might not even be from Maryland. None of your partners might not be from Maryland. You might not want to default into the state of Maryland. You might want to start giving out equity to people because you don't have a lot of cash. And you want to know how to do that. And it's kind of tricky and difficult and hairy and uncertain, and things like this go through the roof when you try to do that with a sole proprietorship or with a general partnership that's unregistered. So let's talk more about that. So before you can figure out whether you should stay where you are right now, which might be an unregistered company, or whether you should register, is like, well, what do you want to do? What are your goals, right? Some of you are in this room and you want to create a company, but you kind of want to do what I call a lifestyle company, right? This is like the most exciting idea you've ever had for a business idea. It's going to be the idea of your life, but you just want to kind of work on it and make it perfect because this might be the best idea you've ever had. Oh yeah, you'll think of other things, you'll do other things, but this one you kind of want to hold on to for years and years. And if it goes somewhere, great. But if it's going to go out in the world, it's going to have to be art by the time it does. You don't really care about sharing it with other people. You might want to definitely keep that intellectual property to yourself and closely hold that and effectively loan it, right, or license it to any other company or any other group that you do stuff with. In this case, you might actually want to stay a sole proprietorship because really what you are is a extremely skilled contractor who might take his brilliant inventions out in the world and license them, but it's really all about you and your crafting and your work. If you're here in this room, you're probably not there. You're probably thinking about, I want to do something big. I've got this time, I'm in college. I want to see if I can come up with a great idea. I don't know if I have it, but I'm going to just keep doing businesses and work on ideas until I find the one that's like, this is the gold, and then I'm going to run with it. I might have a great idea. I might have a great team, but maybe I don't have both. Or maybe I'm not sure if I have both, but it's good enough. One of these things is good enough that I'm going to run with it. And I'm going to say I'm in business and we're going to do it. If you're in this bucket, registration becomes super important to you because once you get that registration selected where you're going to do it, you pick your form, you can start doing things with this idea and allow this business to evolve over time more easily because the legal system has created this wonderful framework for you to play in and has answered a lot of the questions that are going to come up for you, like, what if one of us leaves and goes to grad school? What if we want to hire a bunch of contractors and not pay them any money and just give them equity? What if we want to bootstrap for a couple of years, but we want to clearly define what happens if one of us leaves and we're all putting in ideas all together in a big mishmash? Any of those kinds of things. Or what if I want to take a loan from a family member or an organization and they require that I be a real registered company to take me seriously and to do this? You're going to want to register. And then finally, you've got business in the blood, right? You can sell anything. You can sell, ice cubes to Eskimos, so you're just like, you've already got media on campus and elsewhere. Your idea is like the darling. Everyone just loves it. So it's like an amazing idea, and you know how to sell it, and you've got the perfect team, whether it's just you because you're perfect. Some of you are perfect in the room, right? Or just the team is like, these are my brothers and my sisters, and like, I want to do 7 businesses with these people, and I don't care what business it is. These are the people who are going to make amazing things happen. And when you get to this level, it's even more important to register your business because guess what? Sooner rather than later, you're going to really and truly be in business. You're going to start making money with this kind of situation. And you're going to have to hire people, and you're going to have to do all the things that a traditional business does, and you're going to need protection from this business, right? So we talked about liability generally. So really, when you register your business, which you don't have to do. You could stay a general partnership or a sole proprietorship. The number one thing you gain in Maryland and every other state is that you don't share liability with your company anymore. You get what we call the corporate shield, which means that if the business gets in trouble, if someone's unhappy with the business and they want to sue your business, they can write your name on that claim and file it with the court, but the first thing the judge is going to do is say, all right, we're going to strike this party, which is you, because this business has a corporate shield, it's a registered business. And so you get that, wow, boom. So in other words, you don't go bankrupt when someone decides that you have the money of all your partners and they're going to sue you to try to get whatever they think they deserve or can get. So you can be protected from your business, but also your business can be protected from you. Let's face it, a lot of folks have student loans and they're going to have other creditors and you're going to have to take out some debt maybe to just go out there and sell before you get that real funding, and you're going to like maybe max out a credit card because you just gotta, hey, you gotta spend money to make money, right? It'll all work out. You've seen the TV shows. One of you might take it a little bit too far. One of you might burn out, flame out, go to grad school, get married, fall in love, decide they want to walk the walking trails in Europe, and just blow town. And their creditors, if you are unregistered in most states, can go after the company to get paid or any of the partners individually for the debt against any one of the partners. So how well do you know each other? Maybe you want to have a corporate shield protecting each other from each other and also the company from going bankrupt because one of you has a personal situation that could affect the company. So you're in business, right? You guys are in business. You've already thought about all these things. So here we are. That's why you're here today. You already know I'm probably gonna need to do some kind of business registration. Tell me, Juliana, which one should I do? So let me ask you at this point, how many of you have already registered a business in a state at this point? Okay, can you kind of just go around which state and what kind of business? Did I put something in my, no, it's that. All right, so let's start over here. Who said it first? So which state and what kind? Mm-hmm. Okay. What else? Anybody? All right. Who else? Yeah. All right. Maryland actually gets a little bit of love. I love it. Keep going. It's neck and neck. Who else? Anybody? Okay. So you guys are all like LLC experts in the room. I love it. Very good. So your limited liability company, very common choice. Both of these states are actually fabulous states to register your business in. Maryland gets a lot of hate, especially on this campus. I'm not sure why, for being a state to register your business in. And does anybody who hasn't heard me give this talk before, do you know why people pick Delaware even though you're located in Maryland? Why do people do that? Let me ask someone who registered in Delaware, why did you do that? Yeah? Okay. I hear that answer a lot. Keep going. Anybody else? Why did you register? Yeah. I feel like I'm going to take credit for that, like spilling out into the Ethernet of this startup shell, and it's like laying in some like shared file somewhere. I hope that that's the case. All right, so these are two very common answers. This one is just dead wrong. Sorry, totally dead wrong. Yeah, Delaware actually in most cases has higher tax rate than the state of Maryland for most forms of business, and the initial filing fees can be higher in some cases as well. So go ahead. Yeah. There's other reasons, right? And they're good ones. And again, the difference in taxes might be a few percentage points, and some companies don't care because the benefits of things like the court system are big. Also, investor comfort. I'm going to call this. I'm going to give you guys a lecture on shareholder lawsuits, but we'll talk more about it. Okay, so the court system is the right answer Very good. So one of the right answers. So the court system, let's think about it. Delaware is like one of the first states in the United States. They have been trying, a center for business and trying cases related to things that go wrong in business for longer than the country's history. And as a result, that court system has seen over time so many cases, tried so many, heard everything, virtually anything that you could bring to the state of Delaware court system, there's a huge history of precedents. And so you kind of know how the court's going to rule. Judges are not in the business of innovating outside of the Supreme Court. They're in the business of looking at what another judge did and saying, that's the precedent and I have to apply that. And even the Supreme Court, you'll notice, always makes a decision based upon referring to someone else's prior judgment and saying, here's how I would apply that to this situation, and I think this is the right application. Judges do not innovate. So when you have a court system that's clearly defining how every case, virtually every case is going to go down, and you have a court system as a result that is extremely conservative in how it looks at business cases, that means two things. One, less surprise, and two, the other side of that coin, which is predictability. Ambiguity in the law as a business person is your #1 enemy, because when things are ambiguous, you have to hire the lawyer for more time to either interpret it for you, spec out all the possible options, explain to you what could go wrong, and then also fight for you when things do go wrong, because it's uncertain how it's going to play out. So both sides think, let's fight. But when things are predictable, there's no point in spending your $2 million to fight a court case over 2 years, because we know how the court's going to rule, so let's settle. So in the Delaware court system, just the history of it, the way that court is set up, settlement is like a huge pressure, and that saves companies the big dollars, even above those tax savings they could get somewhere else. So court system is a huge piece of that. The other part of that is investor comfort. Every investor you talk to is like, you should be registering in Delaware. And by good, if you can get in the room with them and they like you, you'll just, whatever you want, just give me the money, right? So often investors ask for it. So what's the underbelly of that? Why are the investors asking for it? It's partly related to this court system thing. So, and partly not. So one thing that Delaware courts have done that's a little different than other court systems is that they've given a lot of power to the minority share, so the small percentage owners. And they give them a lot of ability to challenge what you as the majority shareholders or you as the president and CEO and COO of the company are up to. And so as a result, they feel more protected in Delaware. Now, as you can imagine, that might not always cut to your benefit. The good side of that is Delaware courts also really love the business judgment rule, which means if any of you guys go to law school, you're going to hear this again, and you're going to be like, oh yeah, I remember hearing about BJR. Business judgment rule, which means that under the law, we don't try to retroactively decide whether what you did as an executive in your company was the right decision. That's not fair. Today, when you're looking to the future and you don't know what the future is going to be, you might make a decision that is terrible and runs your company into the ground, and your investors who are minority shareholders, right? Hopefully you didn't give them more than 50% of your company. They're going to be ticked. 2 years from now, when your company's going down the tubes and they want to try to collect more money from you or get a bigger piece of the pie than they're owed, and so they're going to maybe file a claim in some courts and say, your judgment was negligent. Like it was like you were trying to harm the company. You breached your fiduciary duty to the company to look out for its interests. No person in their right mind would invest in airline stock in September of 2001, right before 9/11. Oh wait, maybe they would if it was September 1st instead of September 20th. And so the court's not going to say, well, he should have known that 9/11 was going to happen, right? I mean, that's just not reasonable. The same kind of analogy applies in general. Like, you can't know the future. And so in general, the court, especially in Delaware, will give you a lot of carte blanche to make really dumb decisions as executives and not be subject to most minority shareholder suits as a result. So those are some reasons why you might also like Delaware. Truth be told, though, Maryland follows a lot of this too. This is a little bit more friendly to the shareholders. It makes the investors a little bit more comfortable in Delaware. They know what to predict on their side too, so that's why they might prefer Delaware over a Maryland or other states. Also, Maryland gets a lot of flack really because their employment law is really friendly to your employees and maybe a little bit less to the business owner than a Delaware would. And so, and the investors are going to say, go with a Delaware because they know there's less chance of you getting sued by your employees. And that takes up a lot of your time and energy. And you don't want to spend 6 months fighting off an employment lawsuit when you really just want to be like getting your product to market, right? And killing it. So that's a reason too. How big of a deal is this? Again, let's go back to your goals. Are you going to be a company that hires a ton of employees? You're going to be an Uber, but for a different industry where you can't really say they're all contractors. You're going to hire a team. Like I know there's someone in Startup Shell who may or may not be here still, who started a company where they were doing like bringing people who were going to do hair, makeup, to events. And historically, some of that industry is sort of on the line. It's like a hot topic in that industry of like, are all of those folks who work for you going to be able to be treated as contractors under Maryland law, or are they going to be considered as employees? And if they're employees, then there's a lot of potential costs there and liability that arise. Whereas in maybe some other states, they wouldn't be considered as employees, even though you'd called them contractors. So, you know, if you're going to have a business where you're selling people's time, then maybe this is a little bit more of a concern. If you're going to be selling products, it kind of doesn't matter. Unless you're selling a product that's a physical product where you need to build like huge inventory and your overhead costs before you can even have day one of profit are so large that you absolutely have to have investors involved. And so you need to do whatever you can to just look like the prettiest little package for them. Questions? All right, so that's Delaware versus Maryland. There's 48 other states and 7 territories, including DC, which may in fact become a state soon. We'll see. You can pick from any of them. The secret that most people don't know who are in their 40s is that you can shop. You can pick where. All because you're here or from New Jersey, or I'm from Georgia, so that I'm not really sure why I cheer for Jersey, but someone needs to cheer for Jersey. Who's from Jersey? Yes. Yes. You got to give a flip. Where in Jersey are you from?
I lived in Lawrenceville.
Oh, no. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. But you're here now, so you made the right choice. Okay, he can stay, right? He can stay. What about everybody else? Give me a state that's not Maryland, New Jersey, or Delaware that somebody's from. New Mexico. New Mexico. Excellent. You might want to consider New Mexico as a state to register your business in, if you can convince your partners. Because they and Nevada's already done this, and New Mexico is trying to get on the bandwagon, have been trying to make their code look very, very, very much like Delaware's code and try to sort of create this culture of our court system is going to do what Delaware does. So you don't have to go to Delaware and pay those high taxes. Come to our state, and maybe our corporate taxes are low. And so the states know that established entrepreneurs and companies are shopping for where to go. And so again, there is not this one-size-fits-all answer. It is not Delaware LLC or Delaware C Corp every time. It is, look at what you guys want. Where do you guys fall on this spectrum? How important is it to get investment? How soon? How expensive is it to file the registration? In some states, you know, in some cases, if you don't know that you're ever going to want an investor, it might be like 2 or 3 years out before you're needing to pitch anybody, and you might be able to bootstrap the whole way. Go with the state that has the cheapest registration cost and the lowest tax rate every year. And then if you need to convert later, surprise, you can convert your business in most states to another state or another form. Yeah.
I've heard that either Montana or Wyoming is really good for some reason. Can you explain?
Yeah, so again, it's often North Dakota for sure. And I've heard about Montana a little bit too, and I haven't read as much into it. So you might know more about it than I do as far as the strategy. But what you're speaking to is a lot of states are figuring out what the investors want and how to be the lowest tax. It's basically a race to the bottom right now because a lot of folks are getting savvier about this. And I actually give credit to the LegalZooms of the world, which help you shop and realize, oh, wow, I have every option in the world. And so both of these, I think, have the low taxes as a part of the thing, or no corporate tax. And a couple states are trying to come out with this. And again, that's a little deceptive. So you might not have like an annual corporate tax, but you might still have a series of other taxes around. You're a foreign company, so you don't have a physical location, so you still need to pay something because you're basically for your registration as a foreign company in that state. Some states will tax you if you have one employee in their state in a different way than if you don't. And some states will tax you based upon the type of industry you're in differently. And so, especially with software, if any of you are doing a software product, they're kind of getting savvy about that. Like, we'll attract you in, but there might be some hidden things. And this is where, where you might want to talk to a lawyer, but more importantly, you can do a lot of this research on your own. It's all publicly accessible. If you go to some of these like Medium posts, and like there's so many posts that people have put out there that talking about the strategy of picking your state, go through the charts other people have done, and then just like pick your top 3 and like go to the state websites and just compare and see where you want to be. So you have complete freedom in that way. It does not matter where you live. You can live outside of the United States and you can register a business in virtually every state. So there you go. So you can pick where. And again, in general, I'm being a little bit blasé. In general, if you were my client, I would come in and say, it's best to pick a state where at least one of you has some kind of contact, or it's not wholly burdensome for you to get to. Because one of the advantages of being in these states, if you're going based upon the court system, is that you will actually want to take advantage of that court system. And you can imagine if you got like 2 weeks of trial every month because you've got some small little beef with an employee in small claims court, but you still have to go to Vegas and like hang out for a week, that might actually be a great thing. But it's going to be expensive. And it's expensive not just in dollars and the travel, but in your time. And as you have already found out, your time is your #1 resource right now. And you just want to be like really efficient with what you're spending your time on, which is why I'm honored you're here. So that's a thought about where. So, that's actually an argument from Maryland. In other words, at this stage, do what makes sense for your company and what's easiest for you. There's another thing about Startup Shell and University of Maryland entrepreneurs that is very different from other entrepreneurs in most places. You guys in general are not quitting school to work on your project or your company full time. And so you effectively have at least 2 jobs, often 3 or 4, when you count in the other jobs that pay you money that you're doing. And so even more, you have to be maniacal about protecting your time. It feels like, your schedule's your own. It's really the actual amount of hours per day you get to work on versus your competitors who are already in Austin or Silicon Valley or Brooklyn or I'm trying to think like a million other places around the planet that it's almost mind-boggling. A lot of those folks are working full-time and they're competing to get to market with you. So do things that make it easy on you, right? Other thing about why you might want to pick a place that you guys have a connection to is you're going to have to get a resident agent in any state that you register in. And a resident agent, has anybody heard about this before? Yeah? Anybody want to like say what you think it's about, or do you know? Anybody? I saw 2 I haven't heard from you. Go ahead.
I just
Heard of it. Do you know?
Yeah, it's somebody who like lives in the state and like you like your address, so to speak.
Right. And it's like totally bogus. It's like, why do I need to have some person living in the state? I'm a company. I'm not a person. Well, you are a person under the law if you're a company. But my company is a person. It doesn't need another person to be there. I thought I could shop. What's this resident agent thing about? So the resident agent thing is actually about access to justice and thinking about those poor employees and those poor vendors that you might rip off. The reason why every state's going to require that you have one is they have to have some way to serve you with process or a summons to go to court in their state. And they don't want to have to trek to Maryland from Nevada to find you. They want to know that there's somebody in the state you have on record that they can deliver that summons to, who can pick it up. And that's why another thing about resident agent services is that you have to have somebody who is available during the day at that address. And they have to be a resident in that state at that address. So Maryland suddenly looks pretty good. You are all qualified to be resident agents of a Maryland LLC. And you don't have to pay yourselves to do that. If you want to get a resident agent in another state, people will charge you anywhere from like $350, rip off, down to like $89 or $90 a year for that service. And then it's usually just like this business that has like a tiny little office, and they cover the whole state with that tiny little office, and they just collect for like thousands of companies. And most of the time, you're not getting sued, so it's a good business model, by the way. If you guys want to think about like how do we improve resident agent services and how do I hack that, like it's really good. I mean, you just sit there. One person sits there, and just every now and then someone gets a summons, and that's it. And they get like, oh, $89 for every one of those customers. So that's something to think about. So there's a cost there. And it's usually, most people find a service for around $100 a year. And so it's just like, at this stage, that might be a lot of money to you guys, right? You'd rather spend that $100 on like the merch. So that's one reason why you might want to pick a state that you have a connection to. And again, if one of you is from New Mexico, you probably got a grandma or a grandpa who might be there, or an auntie or uncle who's actually home during the day. It's amazing how these folks that you see at the holidays suddenly become part of your business like that because of their physical location. So that's one thing. All right, so any questions so far about the where? Does anybody have like a burning, this is our situation, I need more on the where part? No. All right, let's talk about which. Yeah.
What's the advantage of actually doing a state? How about like other countries? I don't know if you could do like a broad stroke in that.
I mean, that is hard because like now you're asking me to be an expert on the entire world. What country are you thinking about?
I don't know, maybe like England or Spain, something like that.
Yeah. I wish I did. I don't. But I can tell you like generally what the complexity is there, right? And so what kind of business are you guys?
Technology.
All right. Software.
Yeah.
Yes. My brothers. I love you all. I love the software. Okay. Software is tricky too, especially in the UK, especially like the Ireland issue. All right. So depending upon what type of business you have, you might even be subject to like import-export tariffs and like other types of like service tariffs and taxes because you're not physically in that country. And you might have to go through like additional registration steps. The United States is unique in that how easy it makes it for foreign nationals to start businesses here who are not physically here. I mean, any of them can hire one of these services to have a resident agent, and it can have 100% ownership offshore. And very often this happens. I've had clients who have had that situation where, they're 100% offshore, but they just really want to like get into the American market, and they feel like it's very important for their investors, customers, that they be an American-based company. And so if that's a similar concern for you, like your target audience is in Britain, it's soccer hooligans who love Manchester United, I can see why you'd want to maybe go through the hassle of doing the extra research to see if you can sell, the newest Manchester United football, but you're gonna get the licensing. This is too much. We're gonna have like a whole discussion about this. But it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's for sure, there's gonna be some kind of extra cost or burden that will cost time or money. And so you just have to decide, is there enough of a business case for us to do that? And you can do a lot of that research on your own. And then, by the way, if it's an intellectual property related thing, you can go to the IP clinic that is in this building that is free, and they will walk you through international trademark filings or patent filings or domestic ones, and they will prepare your applications for free and talk you through your situation for free, which normally costs you like $3,000 for a trademark. You can get a trademark for like $1,700, $1,500, $1,700 to like, $50,000 for a full patent non-provisional application. They can help you with that. So look into it. Full disclosure, I do some lecturing with them too, so they're like close to my heart. But I'm about the pro bono, right? The free stuff. So that's a good question, though. So yeah, I mean, if international is certainly an option. There are countries that court you for that. There are countries that make it very difficult, like China. If you're not domestically there, Japan makes it very difficult. It's not impossible. It's just you effectively have to hire a resident agent who is like the local CEO of your company, and you have to pay them ginormous amounts of money, and they have to effectively go do all the filings for you, because the filings will never happen in some cases if you don't have someone local going and doing it who has strings they can pull, and it's expensive. So I would say that's, again, another reason. Keep it simple. If you can start here, start here. It's just easier. All right, question, yeah.
If your minority shareholders conclude that you do something that would lead you, that would like rationally lead you to make a decision, a different decision you actually made, will it BJR?
You're gonna go to law school, watch out. That was a great question, and I will see you as a member of the bar in 5 years. So I can't answer that question. I'm gonna give you the lawyer answer. It depends. You gotta give me more facts than that. Which jurisdiction are we in? What exactly did you do? And then we gotta look at some case law to see what judges have done in that specific circumstance. This has been, as you can imagine, because you're thinking about it, this has been litigated and still is litigated to death. And companies spend money still on this because they want to chip away at it. Like these investors, these board members, the shareholders want to chip away at this. Oh man, do they. But for the moment, unless you can show overt fraud, criminality, intentional, or like so egregious negligence, where it's like you were just drunk all the time, you know what I mean? It's really hard to show that you breached your fiduciary duty based upon poor judgment, right? You can actually quite easily breach your fiduciary duty, your duty to the company, because as officers of the company, you have a duty to put the company's needs first above your own individual ones. Even now, guys, even before you register, so keep that in mind. So your own personal interests have to come second when it comes to what your company is going to do. The company does not live for you as officers. You work for it, and you work at the pleasure of the shareholders, which for now, all of the equity holders are yourselves, so it's kind of easy. But in the future, as you get outside investors and potentially go public or just have a lot of investors at the table, you work for them as the CEO, 100%. So when everyone's like, oh, the famous CEO, yeah, they're awesome because they're the quarterback of the team, but the owner of the team is still the owner of the team, right? And you work for him or her. So yeah, so on that point, so the way that you can easily get yourself in trouble with breaching your fiduciary duty to your company is doing things that are not in the best interest of the company directly, purposefully, on the record, right? So for instance, famous case is the Ford case on this issue. So Henry Ford, back in the day, was like, I'm making tons of money. I am the premier American car maker. I think it was like the 30s. Was he still alive then? Or 40s? And he decided he was going to create the Ford Foundation, famous, does a lot of great work. And he took money directly from the company and put it in this foundation and put it to good use. And his shareholders freaked out. And they said, what are you doing? That money, every dollar that comes in this company, you are supposed to actively try to make more money for us so that we have more shareholder equity value. You can't just throw money away like that purposefully to charity. That's not why we invested in this company. So you'd think, well, Henry Ford's totally going to win this. He was a celebrity. I mean, this is good work. He totally lost the case. Big time. Fined, terrible. I think he had to maybe even like step into a different role for a time being. I don't remember the details. It's been a while. But the reason is that his fiduciary duty is clear. He can't just take money and throw it into a foundation unless that is the mission of the company. And then you kind of get into this world of like, shouldn't you be a nonprofit? Because a business exists to make money. And so all of the social good things that a lot of you want to sow into your business, this is actually where you can get into some trouble down the road if you're not really careful of how you structure your company. And this is a perfect dovetail into which type? How are we doing? Do we need a break? Like a 5-minute? No? No? Okay. All right, we'll keep going. So which? We've talked about the where, right? So I would say, hey, if you're thinking like really creatively, look at the Montanas, the North Dakotas, the Nevada. Nevada has become very popular for Silicon Valley startups. So if you're thinking I might want to go out and sell in California or relocate to California after I graduate, and you want to pick an entity in a location that's less expensive than California, $800 plus just to register that LLC. And then every year you got to pay that again. Ridiculous. That's not the taxes every year. That's just registering it. Nevada, I think, has like a 0 corporate tax. LLC, of course, is passed. Anyway, we can talk about that too. But they have adopted the Delaware Code. They've made it very clear that that's their goal, and they're trying to lure corporations to their state because of their very attractive tax situation. Other ones that I hear about, people like Texas, because that's where they want to end up moving, or Florida, and they have, there's no state tax for you personally in those states. And there's also homestead exemptions for taxes. If you buy a house in those states, a large portion of that house or the total cost of it can be off of. Anyway, long story short, these are some places that you see a lot of. So let's talk now about which. And while I'm doing this, anybody else have any other where questions or other questions that have come up so I can address them now? Yeah. Yeah, it's partly for the convenience and just the additional cost of I have to have a registered agent. I would have to go there if there's a court issue. And in some cases, you don't have to pick. When you make your contracts and you've looked at contracts before, they usually have a venue selected and a choice of law. And they mention this, New York, Delaware, wherever, Maryland. You don't have, you can pick in all your contracts to say, I'm going to register in Maryland and I'm going to choose Delaware law for all my contracts. And that's a totally legit thing to do. The risk is that if you have a claim from somebody who wants Maryland law to apply, they can try to register that claim in a Maryland court and say, hey, there's still contacts, legal contacts with the state of Maryland because they're physically located there. And so the court in Maryland will probably be like, yeah, we'll hear your case. And then you're kind of like, oh, and then you have to go through removal. Then you're paying lawyers more money to fight where you're going to have your venue for your case. And it's just, so it's a little bit more risky in that way to do it that way, but you can. 100%. Okay, so where or which? So we just talked about what can go wrong when you try to be a good person, make your company do good things. So this is a way that I think a lot of startup shell people, particularly, and college students in general, can get into trouble, which is, how do I have a company for good? What kind of entity should I select, right? Another big thing is, just like help me look vanilla to investors so that this doesn't freak them out and they just care about my pitch, right? And explain to me why. So when they ask me why I picked where I picked, I have something to say that doesn't sound dumb. And then finally, like, what's best? Beyond, like, what's just best? Right? So these are like the questions I get a lot. So entity selection kind of comes back to this. You know, you just gotta you gotta have like a heart to heart. It's worth the time, your limited time, to sit down with your partners and like have like a kind of adult conversation about not what are we building and what can we do, but like back up for a minute and talk about the business itself. Treat it like one of the people at the table. Like, what do we want for this child we've created? You know, is it gonna go to college? Is it gonna get a PhD? Do we want to give it a trust fund, right? What do we want it to be? Do we want it to like live with us at home forever? And maybe we'll let it have play dates. You know, do we want to try to just like see what it can do and let it fly and maybe it falls? Or is it like brilliant and needs to go to like MIT now? How do we protect and make that happen? And then regardless of this, what do you guys want? This is something that like, as college students, you are so you're such a unique stage of life. It's so cool that you are at this stage of life. You don't have to follow the template that everybody who is 23 and graduated follows at all. You guys can be super creative and create a whole new model for like strategically like what a business while you're in college should be and how it should grow, and like that whole like growth. It doesn't have to be like in 2 years we have to be somewhere. It could be like we're gonna like test it on the college campus and we're gonna keep it small and we're gonna like be really flexible with our equity and everything, and then knowing that some of us are gonna go to grad school, or maybe a lot of us. And you know what? Maybe it's gonna be in 6 different geographic locations, and maybe some of us are gonna come and go. And maybe vesting for you guys of equity, in other words, like saying you each get a piece, but you slowly earn it over time. Maybe it should be a longer time window, so that if one of you, not because you're a bad person, but because you just have opportunity, wants to go off and do something different than what you thought you did when you were 20, can do that when you're 22 or 23 without like sabotaging that business and walking away with like a quarter or half of the equity in that company. Just a thought. So goals, like do this. Like before we can even like really talk about which to get and where, and just spend the time, like have this conversation and like say, if you guys haven't defined clear roles for each other besides like what we're doing right now, talk about what your roles are going to be a year from now, and like have that hard conversation now. And then talk about equity, like not just talk around it, but like talk about it. Write it down on a Google Drive doc, like who gets what and like what the term should be. It doesn't have to be in legal language, just like do something and make it super clear where everybody stands. And like every single one of you, I recommend, should have to have some kind of milestone that you have to meet in order to justify getting your full share. I just think it's super important at this stage because you don't know. You might get into a class next semester that like changes your life, and you just decide to change your major and like whatever, and you get busy. You might fall in love. It tends to happen, especially right about now. And then you get, your startup is this romance that just, these crazy people who just are so fascinating and take up all of your time. It's terrible. And demand so much attention. I'm looking at you, but I don't know if this is the case. But anyway, so that happens. And sometimes you need to pursue that, right? Maybe this person is going to be in a rock band and you want to go on the road with them for 6 months because, I mean, they're blowing up. They're opening for the Chainsmokers. Like, why wouldn't you go? And if that happens, you want to feel like you're not stuck, like not only disappointing people, but sabotaging this business that you might even want to come back to. So that's where I'd start. So from there, once you've got these goals figured out, it's so much easier to know like what kind of category you fall into, right? So let's also put the lifestyle up here just in case. So lifestyle is kind of easy. We talked about sole proprietorship. Sole proprietorships in most states do not even have to be registered. As I mentioned, in Maryland they don't, which means you all already have one if you're by yourself in the company, or a general partnership if you are doing this with other people. Already have one in the state of Maryland. In fact, that's default what you're going to have unless you change that by registration. So gotta do something. So great. So we talked about how this lifestyle is about art. It's about like following your passion, and this whole judgment and like you don't want to think about money. You want to think about really things to do and changing the world what your vision is. And it's a lot easier to do that. Pick proprietorship where you don't have any investors. It's just you. You're always going to be the sole owner. Anybody else that comes into play, you're going to have some kind of contractual relationship with a contractor, or they're an employee, or they're an advisor, or they're like giving you money for free, no strings attached, because they love you and you're an artist and they believe in you and they want to be a benefactor to you. Or you're going to get grants from the state, right? So it doesn't matter. Like, no one's going to question your judgment. This one's a great one, but also potentially an LLC. Right? So we have a lot of LLCs. The reason is, well, actually, let me ask you guys, why did you pick LLC? Everybody. Yeah. Yeah, that's what it means. That's the letters. But why? Why would you pick that? By the way, hi. Hey, it's good. Yeah. You don't know why? Because it's limited liability. Okay, yeah. So you get that corporate shield, right? And like, can I draw a shield? Yes. Yes, I can. All right, awesome. I am not going to get a scholarship to art school. So yeah, so you get a shield, but you kind of get that with every registered form. File. Go ahead. So I'll pass through tax. One time. All right, we got it. Sorry, Juliana. Okay, that's a good one. What else? Somebody told me to. Someone said investors liked it. No? No other reasons? Okay. Simple to file, yeah. But you know what? All of them are simple to file because of the rise of LegalZoom and the fact that you've got clinics on campus. So I am going to say to you again, my friend, I think you're on the right road though. So what you really mean is it's simple to administrate, right? Like when I say C Corp, you're starting to think of board meetings and shareholder meetings and articles of bylaws that have to be drafted out and all this stuff that your time is so valuable. I don't want to spend time on that nonsense. It's just us. Let's just keep this simple. That's a great reason to do an LLC. And pass-through taxation can be a fantastic reason to do this at this stage when you're running a loss. So you're not double taxed. Corporations are called double taxed, which is kind of a misnomer. I mean, it's objectively true. So the corporation is a person if you file a C Corp, right, instead of an LLC. And it has its own tax return, so does an LLC. Hey, but the C Corp has to actually pay taxes. That's where that corporate tax rate stuff we've been talking about comes from. The LLC does not actually pay taxes in, I think, all states. Maybe there's one or two that actually does, but the whole point of it is that it does not pay its own taxes. You still have to do the tax return, sorry, and then say how much money the company made, and then give each of you K-1s, which are this supplemental form on your tax return. So the dark side of this is it just passes through everything to your personal tax return. And so you're still taxed if you make money, but it's on your return, not on the company's return that's paying the bill. So each of you then, based upon your percentage of ownership and liability in the company for debts versus equity versus cost and all those things, you're going to set, I don't want to go into this right now, it's complicated. But once you do that, once you set up your company, typically what you'll do is say, we each get a percentage of ownership, we each are going to take on the liability for that portion of the company, we're each going to take, not the liability, but the costs of the company for that portion and the profits for that, right? So, and then on your turn, that percentage of what comes through the company goes to you. And so it's fabulous when you're running a loss. Why? Anybody? Anybody? Say again? Yeah. So, well, it'll have effectively like, it's almost like a credit on your tax return because you have this negative balance flowing down to your personal tax return, and you made a little bit of money, but suddenly how much you owe has gone down dramatically, maybe even by a tax bracket, because your company isn't doing so great yet. So that can be really nice. So your parents, most of you might even be on your parents' tax return still. So your parents definitely, going back to goals, what's your situation? Talk to your parents. They're going to want to weigh in on this. Because here's what ends up happening. It's a great, terrible thing. Initially, your parents like, so give me your W-2s and stuff. I got to do the tax return. It's coming around that time of year. You give it to them. And oh, and maybe you don't even tell them, you forget to fill out your company tax return for the LLC. And you don't even do it. And then you're like, oh, wait, I got to do that. And your parents don't even ask you about it, right? They figure you're handling it. And because you're running at a loss, you theoretically are not in trouble in the same way you can't be charged a % penalty on not having filed a return because the % on zero is still zero. But the moment you start making $1, then at that point your parents are suddenly getting passed you're not just a loss. By the way, when you're making negative amount in your business and you do actually do your tax return because I've told you to, and then you bring this to your parents and say, look, I ran a loss in my business. Isn't it fabulous? You're now going to pay fewer taxes this year. See why you should invest in us? You're going to get that money back in spades by not having to pay that money to taxes. Pay that, instead of paying that money to extra taxes, pay it to us. And then I'll be famous and I'll, set you up in retirement when this business succeeds. So it's a great thing. But then the moment you start making money, oh man, and then you blow up. It's a terrible, wonderful thing. If you're still an LLC and you're still in your parents' tax return, suddenly they get a surprise because now they might be bumped up a tax bracket because of your company doing well. And oh, you didn't think about it because you're not an accountant. You're a business person who happens to be in college, and that's why you're on your parents' return. So keep that in mind. If you have a company that's kind of in this category where it's like you're doing pre-sales before you even launch the product, and you're going to make money from day one, and it's the kind of business where you can make money pre-sales before, you're going to be in the black very quickly if you do it right. You might want to think twice about LLC for your parents' sake. You definitely want to talk to your parents about this. If it's this, LLC might be great. It might take you a year or two to get to the point where you might be making tons of money, but you might also have a business model where you have to have a lot of overhead and spend. And so you might on hold not actually make that much money, and an LLC might be great. Let's get me the benefit of that, right? And when it's your own tax return, even better. So that's two things to think about. So pass-through tax is going to be great. Again, we've sort of hinted at now why you want a C Corp. So once your company starts making money, the downside of the LLC too is, what does that mean? So at the end of the year, if your company has done well, you effectively get hit with a big tax bill. And so you would say at the end of the year, great, now we have this pool of money we can spend next year on building our company, but no, you have to pay a huge chunk of that out the door to taxes. And worse, as an LLC, it's basically a hybrid between a corporation. You have all the benefits of the shield of a corporation, but you don't have any of the formalities. It's almost like you're a general partnership mixed with a corporation. They had a love child, it's called the LLC. So if you get to that point where you're making money, something in the back of your mind, please set that alarm. Oh, wow, we're making money. Didn't that lawyer lady who came to Startup Shell say something like an alarm should go off? Ding, 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 ding. At that moment, you're making money. Start thinking about how you're going to have to pay quarterly to the IRS an estimate of how much tax you're going to owe at the end of the year. Because if you don't do that and you wait till the end of the year and you've made money, you're not only going to have to pay the tax rate on your personal return for how much extra money you made, but you're going to have to pay big penalties for every day past whenever you made that money that you didn't start estimating and pay estimates throughout the year. And a ton of founders get into this trouble. And they don't figure it out until April of the following year when it's due. And they're like, oh crap, I need to file an extension until October because I'm not ready to do my tax return. It doesn't really matter. And then October comes and it's literally been like a year and a half since they were supposed to pay those quarterly estimates. And those penalty fees have just been racking up. But it's like 6-7%. It's actually kind of, this is why people hate the IRS. I mean, it's awful. So all this is to say that an LLC is not a fantastic model if you want to kind of trap the money in your company and you can show you have liquidity, but you potentially have big expenses coming. With a C Corp in the accounting level, there's a lot more ways you can kind of shelter that money in the company by talking about future expenses and treating them as if they're current on your tax return. And there's just fun stuff. So when you get to the point where your company is going to make big money, hire an accountant, immediately. When you get that first big lump, hire the accountant because they will pay for themselves hugely. And you don't have time to do that complicated stuff. If you wanted to, you would start an accounting business. You're in business doing what you do really well. All right, do we need a break? Good, I can wrap this up. All right, so we've talked about LLC, C Corp. Let's talk about lifestyle. So, this is a great one here. Fast, company for good. You're gonna get into trouble in a traditional C Corp if you are successful. If you're not, no one will care. But if you like the simplicity of the LLC, Maryland and a few other states have what we call benefit organizations or B organizations, like the B LLC. and the B Corp, which allow you to register those traditional forms. Everyone knows, they know what they mean. The investors maybe aren't as scared of them, but yet you get to say, I'm saying in my charter, I'm going to do social good things as well as make money. And you can't sue me if I do. Really awesome stuff. And they're kind of new. So new is ambiguous. Nah, some investors won't like them. But if you start this way and then later convert them, at least you're starting off by making it 100% clear to everybody, this is what we're into. And so if they invest in you and require you to change your form, it's going to be a lot harder for them to sue you and win, because the judge is going to say, well, didn't they start as a benefit corp? They let you know that this was part of the mission of the org. So it might be an interesting thing to do. And it's actually also a great marketing tool, because it's still kind of sexy and new, and reporters like to cover it because it's not as common. So that could be good. Earn media. Also, company for good, of course, do a nonprofit and talk to Amrita, because she's going through this right now. Right? You want to tell your story? Yeah. 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 She would love to like reinvest that money in a variety of ways, not just making more money, but for this, you know, this bigger vision, and that 100%. And more importantly, with a nonprofit, you can provide people with tax-exempt donations, which is really like, really for them, not for you as much. It just means that when they, at the end of the year, pay their taxes, they get deduction for having donated to you. And so it's easier for them to donate because their dollars go, it's not as expensive for them. So these are like what I'd recommend. Go for the benefit corps, go for your nonprofit, if this is truly like sewn into what you do. And when you do this, this is why you really need to join Startup Shell, because Startup Shell itself went through this process. Technica is going through it. BitCamp, I believe, is going to go through it. And I'm looking at Anthony, maybe. They're almost through it. So you've got folks who've done this, who can help coach you, and it's not, you know, it's not impossible. It's just not easy. It's not an LLC filing on LegalZoom. But in addition, they have like templates that you can look at too, which is huge. So that's there. Investor friendly, C Corp for sure. Again, it's just the oldest form. I mean, it's just everyone knows exactly what it's about. It gives them tons of insight into your company, because what are the shareholder and board meetings about? You have to report on the record in meeting minutes what you're up to. And then they can go back at any time and ask to see all those records. As shareholders, they have those rights under this form, and they can always just like basically audit you. And they can very easily overturn your leadership. With an LLC, you don't have to have a board meeting. You don't have to like elect who's going to be your officers and decide who's going to run that company every year. Theoretically, with a C Corp, every year you are re-electing and like voting on your leadership, and everyone from the chairman of the board down to all of the C-suite could be kicked out at any time if the shareholders vote them out. So this is a super powerful tool for the shareholders. They love it. These investors love it. They're going to pretty much require it. Unless they're angel investors, which is like individual, a real angel is like an individual wealthy person who maybe even has a couple other wealthy guys, and they make a syndicate under the Jobs Act stuff. And we could talk about that in a whole other session, which would be fun. All right, and then what's best? Well, again, if none of these things really sound like you, then what's best is sitting down and talking about those goals, and then like coming back to a person like me and being like, we're a unique company. We're in this situation. What's really best for us? It might be LLC, right? Just get it done. I can convert that later. It might be a general partnership. Like if you're going to start like a service company, like you're going to start like, you're going to go after TurboTax. Like something like this might actually be really great, because you're going to hire a bunch of accountants or accounting students. And you want to kind of like incentivize them to be in the early stages by just giving them pieces, a track to get pieces of the company, and share. They have to share liability in certain fields, so you'd have to do that. So yeah, this is the question that I want you guys to come back to, because you're just, you know that you don't know a lot right now, better than the 40-year-olds who think they know more than they do. You guys actually are like, yeah, I'm a student. I understand I have to learn some stuff. But that means that you're also sometimes more susceptible to like, oh, this is what everybody does. Screw that. The people who break out in their industry and in the way they run their business are the people who like use their critical thinking skills and say, what actually will make me succeed, and not just follow a template that 100 other people have done and only one of them has succeeded at, right? So I guess that's my parting shot. Thanks. All right. So, questions? Yeah. Easiest, the cleanest, the most clear, the least ambiguity, right, from a liability standpoint is C Corp. Because you can create different classes of stock. You can, it's easy to do the vesting terms. There's a million templates out there that you can use that are probably pretty darn good. But an LLC, you can do virtually everything. You can't take classes of stock, but you can do like, you can split up stock and you can do vesting and you can do all those things with an LLC. It's just a different language. It's called membership units or equity units. And there's fewer templates. And so unless you got a lawyer friend, it might be a little bit harder for you to do it in a way that like doesn't require a lot of legal spend. So yeah, so a C Corp, you know, and then it's like a trade-off. Do I want to have to like do a board meeting once a year and a shareholder meeting? And is it worth doing that once a year or twice a year just so I can like get cheap templates? That might be what's best. So you decide. Yeah. Yeah, great question. It can be super easy. It can be literally filing like one sheet of paper in some states. And yeah, it can be almost filing one sheet of paper. So I would say this is a benefit in Delaware and Virginia. I know for sure that it's very easy to convert from an LLC to a C Corp or vice versa. They have like a form online for this. In Virginia and other states that know that you might start in their state and then eventually transition to another state will also have a conversion form or a conversion track where you don't have to effectively close your business and reopen it, which if you've actually taken money in and have investors, like that's a lot of paperwork. You know, if you close a business, like where's that money going to go in limbo in the meantime? And you have to have transition of that money, and everyone's rights have to convert it. I mean, it can be very, that's where you're going to spend money on a lawyer or an accountant, and like, why do that? So if you think you might be in that situation, I know Maryland has this too. I just haven't done it myself, so I can't speak to it. I haven't converted a Maryland company to a Delaware one, but I've done a lot of Virginia or worked with a lot of Virginia to Delaware. But I'm pretty like very sure that Maryland does something similar. But yeah, look into it. And I would just look for the word conversion in their code, or just like on their website. Okay. Yep. Thanks. Yeah. Oh. Yay. Thanks for letting me put you in the hot seat. And this guy was so tough on you.
I would either